The popularity of Olympic weightlifting is at an all-time high, and that has led many of my clients to wonder whether it's something they should start doing. I often have conversations with people that I train about whether Olympic weightlifting is a good fit for them, and if it is, how we should get started. Now, when we talk about weightlifting or Olympic weightlifting, we're referring to the lifts that are the snatch and the clean and jerk, and any of the training that's associated with that, such as power variations, hang variations, and generally just focusing on lifting, strengthening things like squats and pulling from the floor and such. If you're interested in Olympic weightlifting, it could be because you've seen that gradually Great Britain has done better and better at events and we've started winning some more medals. It could also be that you've seen Olympic weightlifting through things like CrossFit as well. Or it might be that you're just generally interested in trying something new because you've taken your strength training to a certain level and you're looking for something a little bit different. It could also be something that you've read about in relation to strength and conditioning. If you're someone that does a sport and you've heard that Olympic weightlifting might help your performance, that's another reason why people tend to ask me about Olympic weightlifting. So now that I'm back in a facility where I can coach Olympic weightlifting, where I have the space and the right equipment to do so, I thought it would be a great time to talk a little bit about Olympic weightlifting, about whether it's a good fit for you and how you should get started if you are interested. Now, I'm not an Olympic weightlifter, but I have been using some of the Olympic lifts in my training for over a decade now. I have both attended and run Olympic weightlifting workshops and taught classes and individuals in how to do the Olympic lifts. I first qualified in coaching the Olympic lifts back in 2012, and I've done the odd occasional friendly competition here and there for some Olympic weightlifting as well. I've definitely had a good look at the pros and cons of Olympic weightlifting for the various approaches that we spoke about before, whether that's just for recreational training, whether that's for CrossFit, whether that's for strength and conditioning. So let's dive into talking about that. Firstly, let's discuss weightlifting as a sport, and whether it's something you should get into just out of your own personal enjoyment, if you have no other sports going on, if it's just as a hobby. And I think here the answer is definitely yes. You should give Olympic weightlifting a go if you're curious about doing it just as a new activity for you. It's very enjoyable, it's very challenging, but it's also very rewarding. And there's a very clear, objective way that you can see your progress over time. Because almost everything about Olympic weightlifting can be modified to you as an individual, it's also quite accessible as a sport to start with. Not only that, but most Olympic weightlifting gyms or clubs that I've been a part of have had lovely atmospheres and really nice communities around them. It's very easy to generalize, of course, but most of the time when you go to a weightlifting club, everyone there is very humble, very inclusive, and very encouraging. If you're still watching this video, I really appreciate it if you were to like, comment, subscribe, share this video around to your friends, any of that kind of YouTube stuff. That would really help me get started with these longer videos where I can provide a bit more education. Also, let me know what kind of videos you would like to see in the comments. If you are someone who already does CrossFit or you're very interested in CrossFit, should you also do some separate weightlifting training on the side to assist with those activities? Again, the answer here is definitely yes. CrossFit is one of those multidisciplinary sports where you have a lot of different things you need to train, and sometimes it can be hard to decide what aspects of your training to focus on. The reason why weightlifting gives you a big bang for your buck here is because for most people, unless you're already very well strength trained, Olympic weightlifting will still help you build your strength. It will help you build your strength in positions that are challenging for your mobility as well, so it will contribute slightly to your mobility work, although you may still need to do some mobility work on the side. And that's without mentioning how the technical aspect of Olympic weightlifting training will directly contribute to how well your Olympic lifts are in CrossFit workouts. Because CrossFit generally leads to a lot of fatigue, it's very easy to start letting your form break down and start making mistakes with your lifts. So if you can really nail your Olympic lifts in their own dedicated session, then you're less likely to make those mistakes in your CrossFit sessions when you're tired as well. Most CrossFit gyms will have dedicated weightlifting sessions alongside their CrossFit workouts, their WODs and things like that. So normally you can just do it at the same location as your CrossFit place. So really do invest that time in that if you want to be good at CrossFit and pick up a new useful skill. Lastly, should you do Olympic weightlifting to benefit your strength and conditioning for a sport? This is something I go back and forth on. When I was studying for my degree in strength and conditioning at university, the way that the course was delivered was as if I was going to be teaching Olympic weightlifting to everyone I saw every day of the week, non-stop. But the reality of most athletes I work with today is that you have a limited amount of time to deliver the best stimulus possible for either strength, speed, or power, whatever it is you're training in that individual at that time. You tend to be working against time constraints, both in terms of the length of the session that you have and the amount of time they have for their next event. So you need to deliver results in a timely fashion, and it may not be the best use of your time to spend 6 to 12 weeks getting someone to be proficient in Olympic weightlifting in the first place before they can really maximize what they do, as in how much weight they're put on the bar and how well they can execute those lifts. That's not actually to say that I am against Olympic weightlifting for athletes. I have taught Olympic weightlifting to athletes in the past. It just sometimes makes it a little bit harder to justify when you know you have limited time with a client, you're designing their program, and you're asking yourself, should I do some jumps, some ballistic weighted movements, some throwing, or should I spend a long chunk of time getting them good enough to do a good clean pull or a hang snatch or something like that? Certainly not impossible. It's certainly doable to get someone to a fairly decent standard of Olympic weightlifting in a moderate amount of time, but it does sometimes make it harder to justify when you know there are other exercises out there that might deliver similar results. If I'm training a client who likes to do a sport, they don't have anything major coming up, maybe they're training recreationally and they only train with me to set some PBs, or maybe it's a long while off before they're going to compete in something again, and they specifically ask me to teach them some Olympic weightlifting, then chances are I'll teach them some Olympic weightlifting. Like I say, if there are some higher stakes involved, like some time constraints or an event coming up, I might not do it at that time. It's more of a long-term investment, and I do think it's very valuable in that role. The other time that I will consider teaching Olympic weightlifting to my clients is when they already are very good at other movements such as squatting, deadlifting, all those other things, because it forms a good foundation for some of the movements that are to come. Aside from a good squat and a good deadlift, some of the other important abilities that I will look out for in clients before deciding whether to teach them Olympic weightlifting is that they have good overhead mobility and they are comfortable with their front rack position for a front squat as well. Those are really the 4 boxes that I feel need to be ticked before you start throwing someone in some Olympic weightlifting. Even with those points, there are still variations you could do to get around some of those points, but I'm talking about if you want someone to fully learn the Olympic lifts. The benefits of Olympic weightlifting to sporting performance are very well researched, and it's a movement that you can load up significantly while still producing a good amount of speed and explosive intent. One aspect of Olympic weightlifting that makes it quite unique in strength and conditioning is the idea that you have to hoist the weight as high as you can, as fast as you can, and then you have to drop under that weight and catch it normally in the bottom of a squat or a split stance for a jerk. And once you catch that weight, you have to be fully engaged, fully rigid, so that weight doesn't just fall on you and bury you. There's quite a unique pattern in Olympic weightlifting of contracting really hard to produce that movement, relaxing slightly to pull yourself under the bar, and then contracting again, getting really engaged again to catch that weight. So in very subjective, very broad terms, this idea of like robustness and catching a weight and being rigid and this kind of on again, off again, on again in terms of your contractions, those are all not particularly sports scientific terms, but I do think there are some skills there that Olympic weightlifting brings to the table that are worthwhile doing if you are training in the long term, you're thinking about your long-term development and you're really prepared to stick at it. It could be a good addition for your strength and conditioning. So to summarize, Olympic weightlifting is almost always a good idea. The only time when I would recommend not doing it is if you need quick results in your training, you need to keep things simple, or when your local coaches are not qualified enough. Make sure that if you do Olympic weightlifting, you stay patient, you stay consistent, and you get yourself a good pair of weightlifting shoes. If you have any more questions about weightlifting or strength and conditioning or just general strength training, put them in the comments below. And again, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.